He just told his men to lock the doors. It's an ambush, Josie whispered, rapidly translating the coastal smuggler's slang. Tarek, the rival boss, was completely convinced he'd flawlessly trapped Taylor Rossi in the warehouse for an execution. He had no idea the plus-size waitress serving them all night was actually a linguistic genius raised in the Middle East. A second later, the entire warehouse erupted into deafening chaos. The arrogant smuggler had no idea this cold-blooded monster was about to tear his men apart to protect his future queen. The ambient lighting inside the Gilded Lily was designed to make its ultra-wealthy patrons look flawless, casting a warm golden glow over the mahogany tables and crystal chandeliers. Tucked into the beating heart of Manhattan, the restaurant was a sanctuary for the elite. For Josephine Miller, it was simply a battlefield where the tips paid the rent. Josie wasn't the typical waitress hired by Albert Henderson, the notoriously strict floor manager. The standard uniform was a tight, unforgiving black dress cut for one specific body type. Josie was beautifully, unapologetically plus-sized. She carried her curves with an innate confidence, dark hair pinned into a sharp twist, lips painted a defiant crimson. Albert had hired her because she had something the other servers didn't: absolute, unshakable composure. She could handle Wall Street billionaires and arrogant celebrities without so much as a blink. But tonight, the air in the restaurant had shifted from opulent to oppressive. At exactly 10 o'clock, the front doors opened and the usual hum of polite conversation died in every throat. Taylor Rossi had arrived. Taylor was a ghost story whispered through the boardrooms and dark alleys of New York. As head of the Rossi syndicate, his legitimate real estate holdings were merely a shiny veneer over an empire built on extortion, smuggling, and blood. He was tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that screamed old money, his face a study in cold, sharp angles, his dark eyes scanning the room with the predatory calm of a man who owned everything he looked at. Flanked by 3 heavily built associates, he was escorted straight to the private alcove in the back, a secluded table shielded by velvet ropes and towering ferns. "Josie," Albert hissed, grabbing her elbow as she passed the bar. His usually ruddy face had gone pale, a sheen of sweat breaking across his forehead. "Table 9, the Rossi party. No eye contact. Don't linger. Pour the wine, take the order, get out of their breathing space." "It's just another table, Albert," Josie said calmly, balancing a silver tray with a ridiculously expensive bottle of Barolo. "It is not just another table," Albert snapped. "That man could buy this building just to burn it down. Be careful." Josie smoothed her apron, took a breath, and approached the alcove. The air grew noticeably colder as she stepped past the velvet rope. Taylor sat at the head of the table, nursing a tumbler of scotch. His right-hand man, Jordan, sat beside him, scrolling a burner phone. "Good evening, gentlemen," Josie said, voice smooth and professional. "Can I start you off with our chef's tasting menu? Or would you prefer to order à la carte?" Taylor didn't look at her, eyes fixed on the candle in the center of the table. Jordan glanced up, a sneer curling his lips. As Josie leaned to pour Jordan's wine, her hip brushed the edge of his oversized leather chair, minor, unavoidable in the tight alcove, and the heavy wine glass clinked sharply against the bottle. A single drop of dark red wine fell, staining the white tablecloth. Jordan clicked his tongue in exaggerated irritation. Taylor finally raised his eyes, obsidian black, entirely without warmth, and looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her full hips and soft waist, a mixture of aristocratic disdain and raw irritation. Without breaking eye contact with her, he leaned toward Jordan and spoke. Not in English. Not in Italian. In rapid guttural Arabic, a language he'd mastered during years negotiating illegal arms trades in the Middle East, one he used freely in public whenever he wanted to speak to his inner circle without the cattle understanding. "Look at this," Taylor murmured in Arabic, dark and mocking. "She eats more than she serves. A clumsy, heavy cow blocking the walkway. Get her out of my sight before she breaks the furniture." Jordan chuckled, low and cruel, already preparing to wave her off like a bothersome insect. They expected her to bow her head. They expected an apology for the spilled drop of wine, completely oblivious to the vicious insult that had just been hurled at her body. They were wrong. Before her father passed away, He'd been a senior civilian contractor for the Department of Defense, stationed in Cairo and later Beirut. Josie had spent 10 years of her childhood and adolescence immersed in that world, studying the dialects, eventually earning a degree in Middle Eastern linguistics. She didn't just understand Arabic. She spoke it with the sharp, street-level fluency of a native. Josie froze. The tray trembled for a fraction of a second before her grip turned to iron. A hot, blinding wave of indignation swept over her, drowning out every one of Albert's warnings. She set the wine bottle down on the table, a heavy thud that made Jordan jump. Then she squared her shoulders and looked down at Taylor Rossi. The air in the alcove seemed to vacuum itself out. "A real man," Josie said, her Arabic ringing out clear, sharp, and flawlessly pronounced, cutting straight through the jazz playing overhead. "Does not need to borrow another language to insult a woman's body. Only a pathetic coward hides behind words he assumes his victim can't understand." Jordan's jaw dropped so fast it practically unhinged. The burner phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor. Taylor's reaction was something else entirely. The bored, aristocratic disdain vanished from his face, replaced by a shock so profound it paralyzed his features. His dark eyes widened, locked onto her fierce, blazing gaze. For 10 agonizing seconds no one moved. The 2 armed guards by the ferns instinctively reached inside their jackets, sensing the sudden spike in tension, but Taylor raised a single finger, stopping them dead. "You," Taylor started, voice a rough whisper switching to English. "If my presence offends you, sir," Josie continued smoothly in English, ice dripping from every word, "I will gladly have another server take over your table. Enjoy your evening." Without waiting for his dismissal, Josie turned on her heel and walked out of the alcove, head high, posture immaculate. Behind her, the mob boss's silence was louder than a gunshot. For the next 48 hours, Josie waited for the sky to fall. She jumped every time her apartment buzzer rang. She kept glancing over her shoulder on her walk to the subway. You didn't publicly humiliate the head of the Rossi syndicate and walk away unscathed. But Friday passed, then Saturday, and the streets of Manhattan stayed ordinary. By Tuesday evening, Josie had convinced herself she'd gotten lucky. Maybe he was too arrogant to acknowledge the incident, or had bigger problems than a loudmouthed waitress. She was wrong again. It was 10:30 at night, the restaurant winding down, the last patrons finishing dessert. Josie was in the back tallying receipts when the kitchen door burst open. Hannah, a fellow waitress, rushed in, drained of color. "Josie," Hannah gasped, clutching her chest. "Albert says you need to come out to the floor. Now." "Hannah, what's wrong?" "The restaurant's empty," Hannah said, voice shaking. "I mean completely empty. Some guys in suits came in 10 minutes ago, paid everyone's checks, told all the customers to leave. They locked the front doors." A cold dread coiled in Josie's stomach. She dropped her pen, untied her apron, and pushed past Hannah into the main dining room. The scene was surreal. The Gilded Lily, normally bustling, was completely deserted. Busboys, bartenders, hostesses, all gone. Only Albert stood near the bar, looking like he might faint. And sitting alone at a table in the exact center of the room was Taylor Rossi. No entourage this time. Jordan stood by the front door, arms crossed, locking the deadbolt. Taylor wore a tailored black shirt, top 2 buttons undone, entirely too comfortable in the eerily silent restaurant. When he saw her, he gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit, Josephine," he said, voice a low, commanding baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. Josie held her ground. "How do you know my name?" "I know a great deal more than your name." He leaned back. "Sit." "I am not accustomed to repeating myself. And I'm not accustomed to being held hostage at my place of work," Josie shot back, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She walked over, pulled out the chair, and sat opposite him, back straight, refusing to shrink under his intense, calculating gaze. Up close he was even more intimidating. A dangerous magnetism, a raw, coiled energy that charged the air between them. He studied her face, tracing the curve of her cheek, the defiant set of her jaw. "You have courage, Josephine," Taylor said finally. "Stupid, reckless courage. Do you know what usually happens to people who call me a coward in front of my men?" "I assume they end up at the bottom of the Hudson," Josie replied flatly. If you're here to kill me, Mr. Rossi, doing it in a restaurant full of security cameras seems rather messy for a man of your reputation. Taylor let out a low, rough laugh that startled her. Not cruel. Genuine amusement. I have no intention of harming you. The amusement faded into something sharp and businesslike. In fact, I'm here to offer you a job. Josie stared, sure she'd misheard. A job? You cleared out a 5-star restaurant to offer a waitress a job. I don't need a waitress, Taylor said softly. I need a translator. And a negotiator. He pulled a thick manila folder from his jacket and slid it across the table. My organization is expanding. We're currently negotiating a highly sensitive, highly lucrative supply route with a faction out of Alexandria. Proud, traditional, deeply paranoid men. My usual translators are inadequate. They speak the language, but they don't understand the nuance. They don't grasp the cultural respect the deal requires. And you think I do? Your accent the other night, Taylor murmured, leaning closer, wasn't textbook. It was authentic. You lived in the Middle East. Beirut. Cairo. 10 years. He nodded slowly. Perfect. I need you at a meeting this Friday. You'll translate for me. Read the room. Tell me when they're lying. Make sure my words land with exactly the respect and the underlying threat I intend them to carry. You're out of your mind, Josie scoffed, pushing back her chair. I'm a civilian. I serve overpriced pasta to rich snobs. I am not getting involved in mafia politics. Hire a professional. I cannot use a professional, Taylor countered, eyes hardening. Anyone known in my circles is a liability. I need a ghost, someone completely unconnected to my world, someone they'd never suspect of being more than a pretty hired assistant. He paused, eyes dragging over her curves again, this time with an unsettling heat instead of disdain. Though you are far more than that, aren't you? Josie stood. My answer is no. I'm leaving. Sit down, Josephine. The gentle amusement was gone. A direct, terrifying order. Josie froze but didn't sit. You said you weren't going to hurt me. I am not going to hurt you, Taylor agreed, tapping a long finger against the folder. But I cannot speak for what the Irish syndicate will do to your younger brother. The blood drained from Josie's face. She stared at the folder, a sick feeling rising in her throat. Liam, Taylor said, dropping her brother's name like a sentence being passed. 22 years old, a crippling addiction to underground poker. He currently owes $50,000 to a crew run by a man named Sullivan, notoriously impatient. Liam missed his payment yesterday. Sullivan's men are looking for him right now to break his legs. After that, they'll come looking for you, his only living relative, to collect the rest. Josie grabbed the folder and flipped it open. Photographs of her brother leaving a dingy basement club in Queens, copies of betting slips, a detailed ledger of his debts. Her hands shook violently. She'd known Liam was in trouble. He'd been asking to borrow money for weeks, but she had no idea the hole ran this deep. You bastard, Josie whispered, voice cracking. Did you set him up? I don't play games with children, Taylor replied coldly. His debts are his own. I simply have good informants. But I can make this problem disappear. He stood, a foot taller than her, his proximity overwhelming, the scent of cedarwood and expensive tobacco and power filling the space between them. Help me close this deal with the Alexandrians on Friday. Act as my voice. Ensure I'm not cheated. Do this one thing and I'll wipe Liam's debt clean. I'll pay Sullivan off myself. Your brother lives. And you walk away free. Josie looked up into his dark, fathomless eyes. She hated him in that moment, his arrogance, his power, the effortless way he'd backed her into a corner. But she thought of Liam, her foolish, desperate brother, and knew she had no choice. If I do this, Josie said, voice shaking slightly, chin raised in defiance, you never speak to me again. You never come near my brother. And you never set foot in this restaurant again. Taylor stared down at her, something complex flickering across his stoic features. He reached out, warm fingers brushing gently against her jaw. She flinched, but he didn't pull away. We have a deal, Josephine, he whispered. The trap was sprung. Josie had just traded a life of serving wine for a seat at the devil's table. Completely unaware, the Mafia boss had no intention of ever letting her walk away. The black armored SUV cut through the rain-slick streets of the Brooklyn Navy Yards, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Josie sat rigid in the back seat, hands folded tight in her lap, wearing a tailored midnight blue pantsuit provided by Taylor's personal tailor just hours earlier, meant as a kind of psychological armor, though beneath the perfectly fitted fabric she felt entirely exposed. Taylor sat beside her, a silent, imposing shadow in the dim interior. She glanced at the hard lines of his jaw, the relaxed way he held a heavy suppressed pistol on his knee. He was a man heading to a routine business meeting. She was a woman walking blindly into the abyss. "Are you afraid, Josephine?" he asked suddenly, not turning his head. "I am terrified," she admitted, voice trembling despite herself. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It keeps you alive." He finally turned to look at her. "Remember the plan. Translate exactly what Tarek says word for word. But more importantly, listen for what he doesn't say. The hesitation. The shift in tone. You're my radar tonight." The SUV rolled to a stop outside a desolate shipping warehouse, rain hammering the roof in a relentless rhythm. It was time. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous, damp, smelling of salt water, rust and old dried blood. A single halogen lamp hung from the high ceiling, casting harsh shadows over a large wooden crate serving as a makeshift negotiation table. On the far side of the light stood 5 men. The leader, Tarek, a slender, elegant man with slicked-back silver hair and eyes like shattered glass. Taylor stepped confidently into the light, gesturing for Josie to stand just behind his right shoulder. Jordan and 2 other guards fanned out to secure the perimeter. Tarek smiled, thin, venomous, not reaching his eyes, and began in rapid, formal Arabic. "Welcome, Mr. Rossi. It is a profound honor to finally conduct our mutual business face-to-face." Josie translated seamlessly, her voice steady, entirely without emotion. Taylor answered in English, laying out his terms for the illegal weapons shipment, tone leaving no room for negotiation. The back and forth dragged on, a delicate, dangerous dance of power, greed, and posturing. For 20 agonizing minutes, everything went exactly as Taylor had anticipated. Then the room shifted. Tarek's tone dropped, softening, growing musical. Talk of mutual respect, shared enemies, long-term profits. But Josie, listening with the trained ear of a linguistic expert, caught the change. He'd switched, mid-sentence, from the formal dialect he'd been using all evening into a highly specific regional slang used exclusively by the coastal smugglers of Alexandria. He wasn't speaking to Taylor anymore. He was giving an execution order to hidden men. "The shipment is fully ready," Tarek said smoothly, eyes locked on Taylor's. "We can finalize the transfer tonight, but we require a gesture of good faith from your side." But the slang, the hidden context woven into every syllable, meant something else entirely. Josie's blood ran cold. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She leaned close to Taylor's ear, breath hitching. "He just told his men on the catwalk to lock the heavy doors," Josie whispered, panic bleeding into her voice. "It's an ambush, Taylor. They don't have the shipment at all. They're here to execute you and take the Eastern Territory." Taylor didn't flinch. Didn't look up at the shadows overhead. His expression stayed a mask of carved stone. "Tell Tarek," he said in English, low and terrifying, echoing through the warehouse, "that I am fresh out of good faith." Before Josie could even open her mouth to translate the warning, the warehouse erupted into deafening chaos. Taylor moved with terrifying predatory speed, grabbing Josie by the waist and practically throwing her behind a massive steel shipping container, just as the first barrage of automatic gunfire rained down from the hidden catwalk overhead. The roar of it filled the cavernous space, endless and deafening. Cement dust, shattered glass, blinding sparks showered down around them. Josie hit the cold concrete hard, covering her ears, pressing her face to her knees, trembling as the world tore itself apart. Taylor immediately returned fire, his face a mask of cold, calculated fury. No longer a polished businessman, but a ruthless warlord defending his life and his empire. "Stay down," Taylor roared over the cacophony of shattering metal and ricocheting bullets. The warehouse had become a battlefield. Jordan and the other guards returned fire desperately, trying to pin the Alexandrian snipers behind rusted support beams. Tarek had vanished entirely into the shadows, his elegant demeanor replaced by cowardly retreat. Josie pressed her back to the cold, unyielding steel of the container, breath coming in rapid, ragged gasps. She'd never been near a gunfight before, and the sensory overload of it, explosive noise, acrid smoke, the metallic tang of blood in the air, was absolutely terrifying. A stray bullet sparked off the corner of their barricade, a shower of hot metal fragments raining across her shoulder. She cried out, clutching her arm. Taylor dropped to one knee beside her instantly, dark eyes wide with sudden uncharacteristic alarm. "Are you hit?" he demanded, grabbing her shoulder. "No," she gasped, tears stinging her eyes. "Just sparks. I'm okay." His grip on her was iron and strangely incredibly protective. In the middle of chaos, surrounded by men wanting his head, he was singularly focused on her survival. "Jordan," Taylor barked into the encrypted radio clipped to his collar. "Suppressing fire on the east wall now. We're moving to the loading bay exit." He turned back to Josie, face mere inches from hers, the scent of gunpowder and cedarwood cologne wrapping entirely around her senses. "Listen to me, Josephine. When I give the signal, run straight for the exit. Don't stop for anything. Don't look back. I'll cover you." "I can't outrun bullets," she cried, panic threatening to swallow her whole. "You won't have to," he promised, his voice an unbreakable anchor in the storm. "I will not let them touch you. Do you trust me?" It was an absurd question. He was a mafia boss, a violent criminal, a man who had ruthlessly blackmailed her into this nightmare. And yet, looking into his eyes, she saw an absolute, unwavering resolve. He was putting his own life on the line to make sure she survived his mistake. Josie swallowed hard and nodded. "Go," Taylor shouted, stepping boldly out from cover, unleashing a relentless barrage toward the catwalk. Josie ran. She pushed her legs as hard as they'd go, her expensive shoes slipping on the wet concrete. The exit was a glowing rectangle of pale moonlight 50 yards away, gunfire deafening around her, but miraculously nothing touched her. Taylor's covering fire suppressed the enemy completely. She burst through the heavy loading bay doors into the freezing rain-swept night. A moment later, Taylor emerged from the dark, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a secondary extraction vehicle hidden in an alleyway. They threw themselves into the back of the armored sedan, and it tore off into the night. The safe house was a lavish, heavily fortified penthouse overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline, a stark contrast to the bloody warehouse they'd just escaped. Josie sat curled on a velvet sofa, a blanket around her shoulders, staring blankly into a roaring fireplace. Taylor stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass of amber whiskey, having shed his ruined jacket, his white shirt streaked with dirt and soot, entirely unbothered by the night's violence. "You saved my life tonight, Josephine," he said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. "If you hadn't caught that dialect shift, I'd be lying dead on that warehouse floor right now." Tarek played a very clever game, but he underestimated the waitress. Josie looked up, exhaustion wearing thin against her lingering anger. "I did what I had to do to survive, Taylor. I held up my end. Now it's time for you to hold up yours." Taylor turned to face her, expression unreadable, and walked to a polished mahogany desk. He picked up a thick envelope and set it gently on the coffee table in front of her. "Liam's debts are fully paid," Taylor said firmly. "Sullivan will never look his way again. Your brother is completely free. And as promised, so are you." Josie stared at the envelope, a wave of relief washing over her. The nightmare was over. She could go back to her quiet, ordinary life, go back to being an invisible server pouring wine for arrogant billionaires. But looking at Taylor standing there in the firelight, she realized something terrifying. The thought of walking out that door and never seeing him again felt strangely hollow. She stood, letting the blanket fall from her shoulders, and picked up the envelope. "Thank you," she said softly, turning toward the door, heart aching with a bizarre, confusing sorrow. But before she could take 3 steps, Taylor moved in a blur, standing directly in front of her, blocking her path, dark eyes burning. I said you were free to go, he murmured, voice dropping to a rough, hypnotic whisper as he stepped closer. I never said I would let you walk away. Josie's breath caught. We had a deal, Taylor. I am a selfish, ruthless man, Josephine, he confessed, tracing the curve of her cheek gently. I have built an empire on blood and fear. But tonight I found something far more valuable than territory or weapons. I found a queen who can stand beside me in the absolute darkest of storms. You are brilliant, fierce, unflinching, and incredibly beautiful. I cannot let you walk back into a life that doesn't deserve you. You belong in my world now. He leaned down until his lips were fractions of an inch from hers. Stay with me. Rule this city with me. Let me give you everything you've ever been denied. Josie looked up into the eyes of the most dangerous man in New York. A man who had insulted her, threatened her, and ultimately saved her. The sensible, safe part of her mind screamed to run. But the fierce, untamed part of her heart, the part that had confidently called a Mafia boss a coward, in Arabic, to his face, leaned forward instead. She closed the last distance between them, capturing his lips in a fiery, desperate kiss that sealed her fate forever. The plus-size waitress was gone. The queen of the Rossi syndicate had officially arrived. Did you love this thrilling Mafia romance? If Josie's fierce bravery and Taylor's dark, protective energy kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this story with your fellow romance readers, and subscribe to the channel for more intense, dramatic, and twist-filled audio stories, uploaded every single week. Leave a comment below telling us what you think Taylor will do next.